Good morning, everybody, and happy Monday. Big Super Bowl was last night. Hope everybody enjoyed it. But today we shall get back to some math. So today we're going to be doing for homework, as you can see here, the the Monday, February 3rd homework, and we're going to start off on the top with some fractions here. So the first thing I notice when I look at these fractions is that I have 5/6 and a fourth. Now, I know that 5/6 only needs one more sixth to make a whole. And I know that a fourth is bigger than a sixth because since it has fewer pieces, that means those pieces are going to be bigger. So I know that 5/6, if I just write that down, 5/6 plus 1/4, I know that's going to give me something greater than a whole. It has to be bigger than a whole because I know that those pieces going together are going to be bigger than a whole. So we have 8 and 5/6 and 15 and a fourth. Now, I know then that when I add my whole numbers together, 8 and 15, 8 plus 15 is 23. I know from this is going to give me another whole. That tells me then that my answer is going to be 24 and something because I have that extra whole. Now, I just have to, from this point, figure out what is 5/6 and a fourth put together. Well, something I can do there is I can find common denominators. So if I go over here and make a chart for my common denominators, you have 6 and 4, and write down multiples of each of those numbers. So we have 6, 12, 18, 4, 8, 12, and there's my common denominator, which is 12. Now, we can change each of these fractions into twelfths just by multiplying both the numerator and the denominator. So if I start with 5/6, I'm going to say it's equal some twelfths. And I'm thinking, what times 6 is 12? Well, that's times 2, and then 5 times 2 gives me 10 twelfths. And then I can do the same thing with 1/4 to give me twelfths as well. After then, I can just add those pieces together. Think when you get to your final answer, remember that we have that 24 because we know that 24 wholes has to be in our answer because of that 5/6 plus 1/4 in the beginning. All right. Our second question over here is really similar. And one thing I want you to notice right from the bat, kind of similar to this past one, is I know that 3/4, because 3/4 is bigger than half. It's only 1/4 away from a whole. I know it has to be bigger than 1/8 because 1/8 is not even 1/4. So I know then that if I'm subtracting here, that regrouping is going to have to happen. Now, the first thing I want to do here again is I want to make a common denominator. So I'm going to have an 8 and a 4. And my common denominator here is going to be 8. So I'm going to make each of these into 8. So 8 and 1, 8 minus 2, and it's going to be 6, 8. Now, from this point, I know that I can't subtract 6/8 away from 1/8. So I'm going to have to regroup. I'm going to take a whole away, which gives me 7. Now remember, when I have taken away a whole, the only way I can do that is if I put it back, if I add that whole back. So when I'm adding it back, I want you to really pay attention to the denominator there to decide how we're going to add it back. Remember, one whole is the same as 8 eighths. And notice all of my denominators are 8. Now if I put 1/8 together with 8/8, that gives me 9/8. From this point, all you have to do is subtract, but really think about how we got to that point. All right. Oh, one more thing on that. Make sure that for each of these that you're simplifying your answers. Right, going down. All right. So what are the fractions and decimals on the number line from least to greatest? Now, the first thing I notice here is that my number line is going from 0 to 4, which tells me that we're going to have some whole numbers in between that we're going to have to deal with. So from 0 to 4. So starting off, I know that in between 0 and 4 would be 2. In between 0 and 2 would be 1. and in between 2 and 4 would be 3. So we can kind of choose where we're going to put our numbers accordingly based upon that. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and look, do we have numbers that are more than at least one hole? And we do. Notice this one has at least a hole. This one has 3 holes. This one has a hole. And this one has 2 holes. Now, accordingly, we know that we're going to put our numbers on the number line based upon that. Now, the first one I see is 1 and 3/12. That tells me it's going to fit somewhere in between here because it's bigger than 1, but less than 2. Now, I know that 1 and a half would fit there between 1 and 2. And I know that 3/12 is a half of a half. And the way that I know that is because 6/12 is a half, and 3/12 is a half of a half, half of 6. So I know 1 and 3/12 is going to fit right here. Now, accordingly, we can continually do the rest of that number line. Really think about the whole number first, and then about that fractional or decimal piece and where it is that it's going to fit. You guys can do that. All right. Taking us to our last question, we have our word problem here. And let's set up our chart. We have our info, we have our question, and we have our strategy. So let's read it. It says, Bryn's favorite part of every day is when she bites into her bowl of cereal, but unfortunately, she hasn't eaten the perfect cereal yet. She has a plan to combine the 3 best cereals of all time, Fruity Pebbles, Lucky Charms, and Ham cereal. This one is new. Her new creation is going to be called, Yep, That's Ham in My Cereal. To make it, she combines 3 3/4 cups of Fruity Pebbles. So 3 3/4 cups of Fruity Pebbles. 2 11/12 cups. So 2 11/12 Lucky Charms. And 1/3 cup, 1/3 Ham cereal. And the question says, how much total cereal will this make? So how much cereal will this make? All right. Now, our strategy here, if we're thinking about how much total cereal is this going to make, we're thinking we have Fruity Pebbles, Lucky Charms, and Ham cereal. We're combining all 3 of those things. That tells me that addition is going to happen here, which means we're going to be taking 3 3/4 plus 2 11/12 plus 1/3. Now, the thing to really think about here is how many holes are there going to be in your answer. Starting off, if I know I have 3 here and I have 2 here, and then I have all 3 of these fractions, I know I'm going to have at least 3 and 2 is 5. Plus, because I know starting off that 3/4 and 11/12 are both bigger than half, I know that I'm going to have at least one more hole. So think about that as you're going through and adding those 3 numbers. Don't forget to make common denominators in this case. Hopefully that helped a little bit with tonight's homework, guys. And I'll see you later in class.